hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace hath brought
Testing 1, 2. Testing 1, 2. All right. Thank you for being here this morning. A lot of people are still having to stay in because roads are in pretty bad shape. Various things. This week seems like it's going much better. Temperatures, weeds are already taking their toll on their. Anyway, things change. That's how it works. So appreciate Jim class for us last week. We had a really good visit with Jennifer, Carrie, Cooper, Josie, and Ariana. Spending newborn Carrie and Jennifer fostering for. This morning, continue our study. Have a handout sheet for lesson 14. Not many questions on it. It's going to deal with Jesus going to pass over Jerusalem and some of the things that took place there, which were, it almost seems when we read that, after some of the other things about Jesus, it seems almost out of character what Jesus did in the temple during that incident. But also puts things in perspective. I think it's good for us as we look at those things. It helps me. And so in your other handout, the other side of your handout sheet, sort of gone back and I've sort of reviewed just a little bit and sort of set up, what's occurred in a summary, but in perspective, how Jesus began his ministry, how things took steps from one to the other. That time where what we're dealing with this morning is really his first major public appearance and ministry that he did, and no less in Jerusalem. It was the seat of first Judaism and those that were questioning what Jesus was doing and what they had heard. And so we'll go over that in just a moment. As we begin, let's have a prayer. Richard has mentioned to me, Gene has begun treatments that they had set up. They were, in fact, able to go to Little Rock on Friday as they would start those treatments, and he's not well at all. So let's pray. Our Father, we do come together on this first day of the week thanking you for how you've loved us and shown so much grace and love for us. And as we study about your Son Jesus, help us to realize how great he is and how very blessed that we are having Jesus as our Savior, one that has gone through so much. Help us and sympathize with us in our weaknesses. Pray, Father, that you would continue to bless our class as we build our faith, continue to gain knowledge and understanding of the Gospels, the time that Jesus spent on this earth, and as we share that with others. Help us, Father, to see the opportunities that you are bringing to us and will bring to us that we might share that gospel with others. Continue to be with the hearts of those who are searching for the truth, and may we find that time that we come together to share with one another what all of this means to us. And for Father, we'd ask you to bless Gene Littleton and Gene through the difficulties that they're having, health issues that Gene is facing. Help him to be comforted and strengthened. May the treatments that's being used be successful for him. Ask your continued blessings as they take care of one another. Ask your healing hand upon them as well. Father, continue with us through this week. Help us to be safe. Thank you for bringing us through so many things that we faced the last couple of years, and pray that we'll continue to be strong and know that you're God and you're in control, and continue to serve you. Help and guidance in our lives. Be with those that's away from us, our families, college students. Continue to bless them, help them to continue to be connected in fellowship. Christians, Father, for our efforts here to bring our flock here back together, to communicate and fellowship with one another. Your blessings upon us. Be with our worship service. May we worship in spirit and you to bless us for this coming. All these things we ask in the name of our Lord. So as Jesus' ministry began, this past few weeks that we've studied, he had come in contact with various people. Go from age 12, where he goes to Jerusalem with his parents and the things that took place there. And from that point until Jesus comes on the scene again, gospel accounts, what we're told is that he continued to grow in stature, favor with God. And when he came back on the scene, things that he did, and people of Nazareth probably knew him as the carpenter's son. We don't have information as far as Joseph, when Joseph passed away. We do know that, as far as we know, there were 4 other brothers, Joseph and Mary. So they were involved here, that, as well as Mary, his mother, and others that were following along with him, the disciples. And this is an interesting thing that we'll want to talk about is sometimes we look at the gospel accounts and we read one to the other about what happened. Look at passages that deal Jesus calling his first disciples. Sometimes we may think, I know I have in the past, just on the surface, that, when Jesus came and he called those disciples, and they just, at that point, dropped everything and went on. But when we look at all the gospel accounts together, then that's not exactly how it was. There was, of course, as a disciple, that means that you're a student. So Jesus, and they would call him rabbi, a teacher. He was teaching them. They would not necessarily go spend all their time with Jesus. They had their own homes. Jesus, as he would go through the country, Judea to Galilee, places in between, he would come back in contact with them. They would go and meet him along somewhere or another. They would do particular things because they lived in different areas. And then there is that time that finally comes to the point. This is sort of what we're trying to speak of here. When he came to the point, and he called them and said, "Come, follow me. I will make you fishers of men." That would be, they are starting their discipleship with Jesus in earnest, being with him, going with him everywhere, and doing the things. So we have to look at that little period of time as time when they were around Jesus. Jesus knew them. They knew Jesus. He would teach them all the things that he needed to do, how he would act and how he would work with people, what he was trying to tell them. And through all of that, they were gradually learning that, there is something different about Jesus, to the point that he started showing some of the things that signs that he did, actions to others, then they were starting to understand perhaps Jesus is the Messiah. And when it came to the point, when we look at John passage where John the baptizer saw Jesus walking along, and he said, "Behold, the Lamb of God." And John the baptizer was able to say that because he knew he had been given the information that when the Spirit descended and remained on Messiah, that's when he would know for sure. That's what he was. He knew for sure that his cousin Jesus was the Messiah. Let's just read what I've got together. And as Jesus' full ministry began and unfolded, it started by meeting John the Baptizer at the Jordan River. And we remember those passages that tells us that as he would come to John. As Jesus informed John that his baptism would fulfill all righteousness, this would also produce a recognition of Jesus as God's Son. John would relate in his gospel account regarding John the Baptizer's testimony of the Spirit descending and remaining upon him, Jesus. Record the testing of Jesus' power over Satan, realization that Jesus had been tempted in every way just as we are, yet without sin. 3 synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, record his 40 days in the wilderness with Satan, and that's what we studied a couple of weeks ago. Following that, John the Baptizer proclaims Jesus as the Son of God who takes away the sin of the world. Up to this time, Jesus has been teaching a small group of his disciples that he came in contact with, as recorded in John's account, on 1:35 through 51. These men and others he would prepare for the ministry that is to follow. They would hear his teaching, see some of the signs he would perform as he would travel from Galilee to Judea and back, Bethany to Cana to Capernaum, places in between. The second calling of these fishermen was good. Become fishers of men to travel and stay with him on his mission. Find that in Matthew 4:18-2, Mark 1:16, also Luke 7. Those with Jesus are thought to be Mary, his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas, disciples Andrew, Daniel, James, John, which John never mentioned himself. His gospel account is the unnamed gospel. So when we look at those things, that sort of gives a perspective how things have transgressed into that point. And right before our lesson today, they have gone to Capernaum. They are staying there. Sort of like that's sort of their maybe home base, we call it, place where they're going to be together when we think about Mary, his mother, and then his brothers, and then also the disciples, first called, who were also disciples of John. And they would continue learning, and then it came to the point that now it was time to go to Jerusalem for the Passover. And I think we can be pretty certain that Jesus, the way that he was raised, things that he's going to be doing history as Messiah, but I think we can be pretty certain that Jesus would go to the Passover every year, age 12 when he first went, till this time here, which they think was about 80 to this particular Passover. Things were a little bit different this time. I think his disciples and those that knew him seeing something different in his particular actions that he took. So if you're following along in your questions, let's sort of review those just a little bit. Did Jesus attend Passover feast? Yes, absolutely. That was part of his Jewish heritage and his Jewish background, doing things that he needed to do in the same way that he told John the Baptizer, well, I want to fulfill all righteousness, and so that's required, and so he attended. What was Jesus' first public appearance when he began his ministry? And this is where they're saying this was actually his first real public appearance. He had appeared to small groups here and there in different places. You know, when we think about the wedding feast in Cana, and when Mary came to him, they ran out of wine and wanted him to do something. Didn't really specifically say, but she knew that he could do something to help somewhere or the other. So you remember what Jesus' reaction was to her? He said what? Yeah, my time is not yet come. It's not time for me to be fully revealed in a public way. And so not everyone at that wedding feast knew what had happened. Mary knew. And maybe some of the attendants knew that was helping him. He told them to fill the stone water pots up to the. They probably saw what was going on. It was not something that was announced, other than what they realized, well, this was the best wine. Usually you serve the best wine first, then the poorer wine, and I don't know exactly what that means. But I know what some people feels that it means. But they mentioned that, well, this is the best one. This is better than what we started with. Yes. So it wasn't anything that Jesus was after to try to bring attention on himself. But here's the point where things change. And so let's read. Let's go to John chapter 1. Verse 12. After this, and this is after the wedding feast, not sure how long, but just sometime after this, he went down to Capernaum with his disciples, and they stayed there. We don't know how defined you is. It could look at Noah. You saved, and it says it's 8. So sometimes it says when you let me 8. That changes, So in verse 13, when it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple courts, he found men selling cattle, sheep, and doves, others sitting at tables exchanging money. So he made a whip out of cords and drove all from the temple area, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. Those who sold doves, he said, "Get these out of here. How dare you turn my Father's house into a market?" His disciples remembered that it is written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." Then the Jews demanded of him, "What miraculous sign can you show us to prove your?" So let's stop there. So when we look at our bullet points on our study sheet and the things that's about to transpire, Jesus found that the temple had become a place of business. John 2:16. So we try to picture this in our minds. If you remember, Jim's covered quite a bit as far as temple layout and what the different courts were. There was the outer courts with the Gentiles meet, and then there's other areas. Well, they believe that this outer court area is that, in fact, that place. And even on your question sheet number 5 and 6, what is the meaning of the Greek word naos? That is that those inner holy areas of the temple. That's not what is used here. The word that is used is hieron, which means the outer court, the outer area. So from what we can remember about what the temple looks like, there's, of course, the outer walls, and then you finally get through those walls, and then these outer courts. And imagine walking into this area. This is the temple of God. This is a magnificent building that was built. It was destroyed. Now it's in the process of being rebuilt. Perhaps 46 years as the Jewish leaders tried just to get to that point, taken 46 years to rebuild. And it's supposed to be a place of worship, a place of prayer, a place of sacrifice, a place where even the Gentiles, women could come. Yet we walk in, starting to hear things as we're getting closer. Is that the sound of animals that I'm hearing? You walk in and imagine all these. There's cattle, sheep, there's doves, all kinds of things. whatever would be associated with animal sacrifices that are made. And they are not quiet. And I'm sure that it doesn't smell good. All of these things go in. Now on top of that, you've got these men who are sitting at their little tables with doing their money exchange. So we're going to look at some of the reasons why would all that take place. It reminds me of like a food. Go into, let's say you've ever been able to go to a big football stadium, or you go to Razorback basketball place up there. First thing you walk in, here's all these businesses around the exterior. Yet, what we got here is a livestock, like a catalog going on. So Jesus walks in, and this is not, it's not what God intended. I think that is very clear. That it was not intended for a temple, something like this, and that's what Jesus made it a place of business. We look at a second incident recorded in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, which when he came into Jerusalem right before his trial and crucifixion, it's depicted that way as well. He calls it a den of robbers' den. So let's look at that and think about that just a moment. Why that he would react the way that he did. What kinds of things were being sold and bartered in the temple outer court? What we know. Have those animals that were going to be needed, whatever sacrifice. There were certain things that had to happen during that Passover. So, but we see that, we understand what's going on there. Well, why had those involved decided to provide these services? So that's an interesting thing. So have some ideas. What have you studied before? Why that they would want to provide these types of things? Think about where, there you go. So there were certain things they needed, and so they decided they were going to use the temple courts to do it. But as Richard was saying, really, that could have been done somewhere else. People have the responsibility of trying to get what they need before they go to the. But it had become a place where they decided, well, let's do this, let's make it easier on everybody. The problem is that we're going a little bit too far. And so now we think about the money changers. Why were the money changers? Well, from what we study and what we read, that there was a temple tax that had to be paid, and that was half a shekel. When I look at, well, what is a shekel? It's a silver coin. Coins were measured by weight of whatever metal that they were. And full shekel worth this figure of time about a regular day's labor. So, like today, if you're making $11 an hour and you work an 8-hour day, that's $88. In a day's labor, well, $44 would have to show up. But there was something that couldn't bring just any kind of money or coins into the temple and pay your tax. It's like if we had pesos or dinero and we tried to go to Walmart and buy something, it wouldn't happen. So we'd have to exchange that into U.S. dollars. Same way we have U.S. dollars and we go to some other country, what do we have to do? We have to exchange it. There's exchange rates that have to be. So we have to change it for whatever combination of money that is used in that country. So they had to pay the temple tax with a half shekel. And if they didn't have it, they had to exchange it, had to change it into something from what they brought. And some of the wording that I read is sometimes, depending on where they came from, they may have had coins that had Caesar stamped on it. They would not accept that. So there were lots of different reasons which were legitimate as far as what was going on, but when we think about why was Jesus so upset, angry is the word, that he would drive all of them out. I think it was sort of like a hen house where a fox had got. See all the hens just scattering, going everywhere that they can, try to get out of there. And so we look at the animal sacrifices. Well, of course, there is a need as well. So why did Jesus take offense at what he saw? So what was happening, what was going on there that really upset Jesus? Was it the fact that they were providing an opportunity for Jewish worshipers to have the sacrifices that they needed or have the correct type of money that they needed to do what was required of them? I don't think so. What else would tells us? They were doing it in God's house. Yes, should not have been there. And what else? I think from what commentary that we read is that, we know business people. Business people are what? Have to make. And so, understanding is that these people were not only providing things that were needed, but they were doing it at an extra cost. They were charging more than what they should. I think that's borne out in the extent of passage. Let's continue reading. Then the Jews demanded of him in verse 18, "What miraculous sign can you show us to prove you have authority to do all this?" Jesus answered them, "Destroy this temple, and I will raise it again in 3 days." Did he say, "I will destroy this temple"? What's inferred here? Anybody can destroy it. Anybody, you destroy the temple. I'll raise it up in 3 days, but is that what he meant? Is he talking about the physical stone? Jews replied, "It has taken 46 years to build this temple. You are going to raise it in 3 days?" That actually happened. It's not. But the temple he had spoken of was his body. After he was raised from the dead, his disciples recalled what he said. They believed Scripture, words that Jesus had spoken. And while he was in Jerusalem at the Passover feast, many people saw the miraculous signs he was doing and believed in his name. So that indicates that as he was in Jerusalem that week, he was doing some other things. He was doing some signs that was allowing other people to believe as well. But Jesus would not entrust himself to them, for he knew all men, did not need man's testimony, for he knew what was in man. So we go on and look at some of the other thoughts that we have here. The second time that this occurred is recorded in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. This is actually, their recordings are dealing with the end of history as he would make that triumphal entry into Jerusalem. He would go to the temple, and there's not as much detail in their accounts, but it still states that he went into the temple. So all this stuff going on. So there's two options here, conclusions. Some people believe that there were two different incidents that this happened. Some people believe, well, no, John is really not writing with concern about chronology. So it's maybe backwards. Doesn't matter, I don't think. Would it really matter? It could happen twice. I don't think that just because Jesus went in AD 28 and drove all these people out of the temple, they were not back at the same time next year. In fact, about 2 years later, possibly 3, Jesus came into Jerusalem for his trial and crucifixion, that possibly they could still be doing the same old things. So I think it's credible. It's possible that there are two actually. How did the Jewish temple authorities react? What did they want from Jesus? What enables you to do? I don't see any, well, evidently not, any of the Jewish authorities were going out there and dispersing the crowd and getting rid of all the livestock, animals, and everything. They never did it. So they were wondering, what makes you God and something like that. And so Jesus didn't give them a direct answer to that, because perhaps maybe some of the little things that they had heard as they would go out and talk to John the Baptizer, the things that he had said about the Messiah was coming, that there was an inclination there that Jesus could do some kind of miraculous sign to show that he was Messiah, but that's not what Jesus was about. It's not what he wanted to do, his purpose or his mission. So he simply stated, this is the sign that you will see. Is that after 3 days, this temple, speaking of, that will be the sign we saw. So the other question is, did any others believe in his name through what he was doing? In John 2:23-5 that we read, yes, so evidently were some other things that Jesus did in Jerusalem during that time. Other signs that he did. Some people may have even heard of some of the things that he did, not in a big public way, but perhaps saw and heard of some of the things that were happening in that region. When we look at a map in some of the early lessons that we did, you would have a map that looks like this, Palestine during the life of Christ. And when we look at the map, and it sort of hones in on where Jerusalem is in Galilee, Judea, Galilee, about a distance there, around the Jerusalem area, you have Bethany, you have Bethphage, Bethlehem, Jericho. They're all around on the north end of the Dead Sea. Then the Jordan would flow up or flow out of the Sea of Galilee. Which up there, you've got the Bethsaida, which is up north, which I believe is the home of Peter. And you have Capernaum, which a lot of things happen in Capernaum. You have Nazareth a little bit farther to the south. So between those two areas, and what was in between? Samaria. We know that they would pass through Samaria. Time Jesus, Samaritan woman fell. So people were learning about what Jesus was doing even in Samaria. So all of that area is where Jesus was covering and going back and forth and having his disciples, the time that he would spend with them, teaching them about all these things. This is what's going to be happening, he would tell them in some cases. And there would be others that would be followed. We know that there were probably some women along with Mary that would travel with them as well. So all these things are starting to happen, take place. And so if you look back now to your question, I think we've covered everything. Did Jesus attend the Passover feast? Yes. What was Jesus' first public appearance? Temple, driving out all the money changers and others. How much was each Jew required to pay tax? Shekel. Could the temple tax be paid with 4 coins? No. What is the meaning of the Greek word naos? That would be most holy places, or the holy place, the inner sanctuary of the temple. Word hieron, that's the outer courts where the Gentiles were allowed to come be there. Jesus gave many signs during his ministry. Yes, he gave plenty of signs. In fact, John, at the close of his account, said there were many other things Jesus did and taught. Not be written. tell about all the things. So it's interesting that we see Jesus in that light, as he would seem to be sort of a mild, collected, calm type of person, through those early days and talking to his disciples. Never was one that would get caught up in things where he was so upset, but when he saw what was happening to the temple, he was upset. So how do we relate that to our life? So what is the temple? We are the temple. So how would Jesus react to, if he comes to this temple, things that he might see in that temple? What would be some of the things that would perhaps upset him? Epistles tells us a lot, Paul especially, about what this temple is supposed to be, how we're supposed to treat this temple, how we're supposed to protect this temple. There's a lot of things that we're not supposed to have in this temple. God lives in us. Jesus died. So we look at that, and it's very relevant. And we think about, well, if Jesus got so upset about that physical building, what was going on, I think he cares about what's going on. He does care. Know that. And so it's very important for us to consider those. Really do everything that we can to make sure that this temple that we're given is as it should be, so that we can experience. Thank you for your comments and your attention.